Hi, it's Steph, and today I'm going to show you how I plant my spring blooming bulbs in planters, containers, and pots. Now that it's fall, if you're a gardener, you've already started to pick up some fall planted spring blooming bulbs. I know I have. And so the next consideration is, where are we going to plant them? In the landscape, in containers, planters? And so that's something that we have to think about, right? Here in my garden, I'm in Massachusetts Zone 6B and I live in the country, so I have a lot of deer pressure. So over the last couple of years, I've started to plant a lot of spring blooming bulbs like tulips, even daffodils do really great in containers, in some planters. That way it's just easier for me to control their environment and to repel deer against them. When I plant them in containers on my porch, they're less likely to come up and eat them than they would be in the landscape. So it's just something that I've enjoyed doing. Now, because I plant my containers up for the holiday season with some winter greens and I decorate them and I keep those in there through, the first half of the winter really, my containers and planters are not available for me to use to plant my spring blooming bulbs in. So I typically hold off and do it at some point in mid to late February or the first week of March. But because I hold off on planting them, I do need to pre-chill my bulbs. And the reason for that is because all spring blooming bulbs need a cool period in order for them to bloom best. So if I'm going to hold off on planting these bulbs, I'm going to need to keep them in a cool, dark place so that they don't start pre-sprouting. Some examples of where you can do this is an unheated garage, unheated basement, unheated shed, and you can put them in a cardboard box or a paper grocery bag, something that will not allow light in. If you don't have any of those options available to you, you can also pre-chill them in a refrigerator. Now, pre-chilling them in gardening zones 8 and up, it does require that you pre-chill your bulbs in order for them to bloom, or at least bloom their best. And you can purchase pre-chilled bulbs, or you can save yourself a little bit of money and do it yourself. My friend Janey over at Dig Plant Water Repeat actually made a video on this just recently. She's in Zone 9 over in California, and so I will link her video in the description of this video below so that if you are in one of those gardening zones, you can get some more information on pre-chilling bulbs. Now, back to planting them in containers. Last February, I actually made a video about how I plant up my containers, what my process is for planting them in containers, any kind of spring blooming bulbs. I have typically only done tulips, but this year I'm also going to try some daffodils. The process is the same. Any kind of spring blooming bulb can be planted in a container. Couple key things is you want to make sure that your containers have proper drainage, and if you live in a spot like I do where you have cold, wet winters, you want to make sure that they drain and that the bulbs will not start rotting by sitting in that cold, wet environment. So those are your most important things when you do plant out your containers. Now you can certainly plant up your containers at any point. Now in fall would absolutely be fine. The only thing you want to ensure is that you have proper drainage in your containers. Living in an area like I do here in Zone 6 in New England, we have very cold and wet, damp winters, snow, rain, and so forth. So there's a real risk that by putting my bulbs in my containers now in fall and letting them sit out through that weather, if I don't have proper drainage, the bulbs can rot before I get any blooms out of them. So it's been working well for me to kind of hold off and planting them a little later, but mostly because I'm using the containers. But otherwise, you can go ahead and plant them anytime you'd like. And here's how I do it. So the first thing you want to do is clean out the containers that you plan on using. These are the same containers that I use for my summer annuals as well as for my Christmas decor. I will use some evergreen cuttings in these and keep them in here through the winter. So I collected these today. A couple of them I've had in the basement kind of thawing over the last few days because they get like pretty rock solid. So last year I actually did these outside, and if you do have containers that are frozen and you're not able to work the soil, a tip that I can give you is what I did last year was I took some really hot water from the faucet and I filled a container and I just kind of dumped them in the pot. And so that hot water helped the soil soften up enough where you can work it. So the first thing, cleaned out your container, you have your soil that is now workable. And what you want to do is you want to give your tulips a good solid 6 inches to grow. So you want to get your soil level down enough so that when you place your tulips, you can put a good 6 inches of soil on top of your tulip bulbs. So what I'm going to do is, if you have too much soil in your container, you want to grab like a bucket or a container, anything that you can kind of just move some soil into. You can use the same potting soil that you've already put in containers. That's a huge place that I see a lot of people waste money on, you know, buying new potting soil every time that they redo their containers. You don't have to do that. You just simply add a little bit of new soil to the top layer, maybe throw in some slow release fertilizer, and you're good to go. You can use that same soil for probably a solid year or two without having to do any kind of replacement. And I don't even think you ever fully need to replace it. You can really just kind of work in amendments as you see fit. Okay, so now that I've taken out a good amount of soil, take a couple more scoops out. I'm going to show you how I do a couple of them, and then I will speed this up. If you have any kind of roots in the container from plants that you've grown in here in the past, you just want to kind of weed those out. The goal is just to really loosen up the soil and to clean it up. See, if I find a couple of sticks or roots or whatever, you can just kind of take them out. Just filtering through the soil. So I'm not sure how much you can see here, but I have probably about 5 to 6 inches down is where my soil is starting. So this is a good spot now for me to start placing my bulbs. See, I found some additional roots in there, so I'm just going to take those out. Now that I've gotten the soil level low enough and all cleaned up, I am ready to start placing my bulbs. Use one of these tools too to get it nice and loose. This is one of those tools that have like a hoe on one side and a rake on the other, and they're really effective for breaking up the soil. What you're going to do is add some fertilizer in here. Now, I didn't have any bulb tone left, but I was keeping my bone meal in here. So if you don't have bulb tone, you can actually use plant tone or any kind of slow release fertilizer. Even something like Osmocote would work. So I have the rest of my bone meal mixed in here with the last few granules of this bulb tone. So I'm just going to work this into the soil. So if you didn't have bulb tone, like I said, Osmocote, plant tone, or even just some bone meal, the point is just to amend the soil with some fertilizer that's going to help these bulbs get nice strong roots. All right, so that's the rest of this package. There was like nothing in here. I didn't think I had any left, and then I found this in the shed, and I just threw the rest of my bone meal in here, mixed in. So now that I've put a fertilizer in here, I'm going to place my bulbs, and I'm going to put these tulips in here. This is the Spring Delight Mix. And so I'm going to take them. See, they're already starting to sprout in the bag. I did keep them in a cool spot. If you're going to keep tulips or keep the bulbs before you plant them for a couple of months, you want to keep them in a cool spot and you want to keep them dark. I had them in this box here, but the box had some holes in it, so I think it was just enough to let some sunlight in where they started to kind of sprout. But if you kept them in, say, a paper bag like from the grocery store in a cool spot allowing no light in, then you probably wouldn't even have sprouts here. But I'm going to go ahead and place these and show you how many I get in this container. So the goal is to get 2 packs in here, or 50 bulbs. So here we are. I was able to get 50 bulbs in this container, and they're all spaced so that they are very close but not touching. And I wanted this to be a nice full display. So now that I have them all placed in this container, I'm going to top them back up with the soil that I removed to make room for the bulbs. And then if it's still too low, then I will add an additional layer of new compost. So I am going to use a little bit. I actually bought a new package of this bulb tone today, and this will last me through my planting next fall because I only use a little bit. I never use as much as it says on the container. Maybe you're supposed to, but in my experience, when I've used even just a little bit, a handful or a little sprinkle like this, it works just fine. And this will last me a lot longer. Okay, once you get your fertilizer in there and you've topped it up with soil, you're good to go. Now, normally I would water this in, but we're expecting rain, so I'm just going to place these outside without watering them. But if you weren't expecting any rain, then I would certainly water them in. But don't put the water in until after you've placed these, because these containers are really heavy. All right, I'm back with some news you can use. So as I was digging through this window box, I noticed that it was a little bit kind of saturated, and it has been outside, so I expected the soil to be wet because it's starting to defrost and it's, you know, it's snowing and whatnot. But in any case, the drainage holes that I have in here, this is the #1 reason that your bulbs will rot. If your drainage holes get plugged up and you have a lot of sitting water in this pot, you're going to get rotted bulbs or rotted plants. Anything that you plant that's going to sit in water isn't going to do well. So what I like to do is I take some plain old coffee filters, and what I do is I put them at the bottom of the soil, actually like right on the pot plastic at the bottom. So I'm going to move all the soil out of the way, and I'm going to lay these right on top of the drainage hole. So this is essentially going to filter the water through the pot, still let it drain, but the soil isn't going to clog up your drainage holes. So it's something that I like to do in all of my pots. I did it when I initially planted this up, but after a while they do kind of just deteriorate. So if you're working in the pot and you're adding fresh soil, it might be a good idea just to check if the holes are getting plugged up. In my case, they were. So I'm going to move the soil out of the way. I'm going to place the coffee filter, and then I'll put my soil back on top. So I've made sure that my drainage holes are nice and cleared. And now I'm going to take my coffee filters and I'm just going to place them at the bottom of my pot. This is a package of coffee filters that I brought to keep with my planting supplies. I bought them purposely for this so that I can always have them to block my drainage holes and place my soil on top so that my holes don't get clogged up. So now I'm going to finish up this window box liner. Done with the boxes, and now I'm just going to place them. In a couple of months, we're going to see all of these pretty blooms. Hopefully, nothing digs them up. Good. Looking good. So I hope this video was helpful to show you how to plant some tulip bulbs in pots. If you have any questions, put them down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.